به نام خداوند جان و خرد، کز این برتر اندیشه بر نگذرد. خداوند نام و خداوند جای، خداوند روزی ده رهنمای. خداوند کیوان و گردان سپهر، فروزنده ماه و ناهید و مهر. ز نام و نشان و گمان برتر است، نگارنده بر شده پیکر است. بدین آلت رای و جان و زبان، ستود آفریننده را کی توان. به هستیش باید که خستو شوی، ز گفتار بیکار یکسو شوی. پرستنده باشی و جوینده را، به ژرفی به فرمانش کردن نگاه. توانا بود هر که دانا بود، توانا بود هر که دانا بود. ز دانش دل پیر برنا بود، به نام خداوند جان و خرد. I start with the famous poetry of Abul Qasim Firdausi, who is considered more or less the first Persian poet. And anyone who knows Persian knows these lines off by heart. In Iran, whenever they have a literary sitting like this, they start with the words of Firdausi. Thank you all for coming, taking out your time out from family, and coming after work to come and learn about Maulana Rumi and Masnavi and this gem of the Islamic tradition. I have it on good authority as well that one of our attendees has, skipped his weekly sports, his indoor biking session to come here. So I'm very, very thankful to the gentleman in question as well. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Masnavi, but we're going to look at Maulana Rumi's life and his character. We'll talk about Masnavi and its influence in Muslim history. And then we will do a reading and analysis of three main themes of the Neynama, which is the first poem of the Masnavi. Now, I hope I don't say too much tonight. I hope I don't overwhelm you with information. It was really difficult for me to try and talk about such an important poem and its themes in this time. If you find lectures on Neynama, they can go on for like 4 hours, for example. So I tried my best. If you take even one thing from tonight, then inshallah may it be of benefit. If it's too much for you, just go out and have a smoke or something and pop back in. So before we talk about Maulana Rumi and the Masnavi, let's talk about adab. The idea of adab. Who can tell me what adab means? Manners? Yes, young man? A time and place for everything, right. So a sense of what's right and what's appropriate. Manners and etiquette. What else does adab mean? Respect, okay. So good morals, right? The right behavior. What else does adab mean? Adab has two meanings in our Islamic languages. Literature, exactly. Adab, in Arabic and in Urdu and in Farsi and all these other languages, it means literature and it means manners and etiquette and cultivated behavior and morals. So it has two meanings at the same time. So this is adab, and what is in this is adab, will teach us adab, right? The idea is that this literature trains us, molds us, guides us, shapes us, polishes us, refines us, right? That's the point of adab. As opposed to, for example, in modern Western literature, where their literature has become more or less a vomiting of the deepest recesses of the mind, whether for better or for worse. But in Islamic civilization, this is meant to take us somewhere. Adab is also not just about doing the right thing or being a good person. Adab is about becoming a particular type of person. Islam wants us to be a moral person, right? Brave, courageous, kind, humble, God-conscious, generous. Adab is meant to shape us and take us there. That's why these two words are connected. And it's such an important thing in Islamic civilization, this idea of tarbiyah and shaping the person, the moral person, as opposed to the political person or the economic person who has nothing to do with morality. Adab is also, the way adab takes place in traditional Muslim civilization is, it's often through poetry, of course, which has this beautiful aesthetic mold to it that makes it easy to remember and it sticks in the heart. And it's through storytelling, through narrative. Narrative and fiction lets you unpack really complex, complicated, nuanced things, like what it means to be alive. So Masnavi is both poetry and storytelling at once. Now let's talk about Maulana Rumi. Maulana Rumi, whose real name was Muhammad bin al-Hussein al-Khatibi al-Balkhi al-Bakri, was born in 1207 and died in 1263. He's commonly known as Jalaluddin or Rumi. But in the Persianate world, he is known most eminently as Maulana. Yak Maulana has to bast. Ek hi Maulana hai. If you say Maulana, for the mind of a Persian reader, it's only Rumi. So if I switch between Rumi and Maulana, don't mind. Rumi was born in Balkh, modern day Afghanistan, and passed away in Konya, modern day Turkey. And he was born into a scholarly family that fled Central Asia in the wake of Mongol invasions. They ended up finally in Konya. Rumi, by virtue of his upbringing, his family, the environment around him, embarked on a career as a jurist, a teacher, and a preacher. By the way, who can tell me what Rumi means? Almost. What does Rumi mean? Roman. The Roman. Why on earth is one of the biggest names in Islamic history called the Roman? Anyone know? हाँ? कि उनका लक़ब रूमी क्यों है?
Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman.
Yes.
Eastern Roman Empire में थे.
So where Rumi and his family ended up settling in modern day Anatolia, that place was called Rome actually. And it was part of the Roman Empire for, by that point, something like 1,000 years. And when Rumi and his family settled, it had only recently, in the last sort of 100, 120 years, been conquered by the Muslim Seljuks. So the land was known as Rum. Rumi went there, lived there, died there. He was known as the Roman. And there were also a lot of Christians who were living around Rumi and in that area, formerly known as, I suppose, Romans, but then they were just known as Christians thereafter. So that's what Rumi means. If you're going to say a word over and over and over again, you should know what it means. Rumi's poetry, Maulana's poetry, represents the larger intellectual life of the 13th century Muslim world, which blended law and spirituality and philosophy altogether. So Rumi was familiar with Sufi concepts, spiritual concepts, right? His father was a spiritual leader in his own right. But Rumi's life, Maulana's life, takes this radical turn when he meets with this mysterious and mystical figure called Shams Tabriz. Maulana knew everything, or he thought he knew everything, right? But it's only in meeting Shams Tabriz, in meeting his teacher, in learning from his teacher what it means to break the ego, that all this knowledge here left his head and entered his heart. And that really is what most of us should be hoping for, what we can really hope for. I'll come back to this idea of spiritual realization entering the heart at the end of the lecture. Maulana's prominent works are, of course, the Masnavi and Ma'navi, the Diwan-e-Shams, which is a collection of love poetry, ghazals, Fihi Ma Fihi, which is a series of beautiful short reflections, Majalis-e-Sabah, 7 sermons, and letters, Maqatib, he wrote to different disciples and important people in his time. Rumi wrote in Arabic, in Persian, in Turkish, and in Greek, which reflects the multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-confessional environment of his time. And Rumi's followers founded the Mevlevi Sufi order, which was really influential in Ottoman times. And today in the West, they have kind of become the public face of Sufism, or the mystical side of Islam. You ask anyone from the West about Sufism or Islamic mysticism, and they'll immediately think about these, of course, whirling dervishes. And that all goes back to Rumi. So, what is the Masnavi? Let's read what the Masnavi is in Maulana's own words. In the introduction to Masnavi, Maulana writes, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. هذا كتاب المثنوي وهو أصول الدين في كشف الأسرار الوصول واليقين وهو فقه الله الأكبر وشرح الله الأزهر وبرهان الله الأظهر يقول العبد الضعيف المحتاج إلى رحمة الله تعالى محمد بن الحسين البلخي تقبل الله منه اجتهدت في تطويل المنظومة المثنوي المشتمل على غرائب ونوادر وغرر المقالات ودرر الدلالات وطريقة الزهاد وحديقة العباد قصيرة المباني كثيرة المعاني. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Most merciful. This is the Masnavi, the root of the root of the root of religion, with respect to the veiling of secrets of arriving at truth and certainty. So Masnavi is a book that unlocks the meaning of truth and certainty. It is the greatest creed and the most luminous of holy laws, as well as the most manifest of the proofs of God. This slave, in need of mercy from the Lord, Muhammad ibn Hussein from Balkh, may God accept him, says, I have striven in composing this long work of rhyming couplets, which comprises wonders and rarities and enlightened sayings, pearls of guidance. It is the path of the aesthetics, it is the garden of the pious, concise in form, but rich in meaning. So Masnavi is rhyming couplets. But I think Maulana was being a bit coy when he says it's concise in form, because Masnavi is 6 books of poetry comprising 25,000 couplets. It's a collection of stories, anecdotes, derived from Quranic material, the life of the Prophet, wisdom literature, and folk humor. Each story is intended to impart a message and teach a moral, with particular emphasis on a sort of inward or spiritual interpretation. Rumi weaves together spiritual and philosophical and psychological and theological meaning in these stories. Through the medium of narrative and fiction and storytelling, he's able to explain things that are so complicated. You'll read a story and he'll be unpicking apart some intricacies in philosophy or psychology, which would be really hard to get if you were reading like a straight book of philosophy. But because it's a story, because it's narrative, because he unpacks it, you get it. Masnavi's storytelling is also quite complex. It uses multiple voices. So the voice of the storyteller, the voice of characters and their dialogue, the voice of moral reflection. There are like 8 different voices speaking all at once during the course of the poetry. And something also interesting is that Masnavi was verbally dictated to Rumi's disciples over the course of 15 years. It came to him like kashf, like ilham, and he would say it and his disciples would write it. And then they would go back over it and, I suppose, review it. Here's a question. What does Masnavi mean?
A word derived from two.
Excellent. Masnavi comes from the Arabic word ithnan or ithnain, 2. And it refers to the poetic structure. So traditional Islamic poetry always comes in a couplet. First line, second line. First line sets it up, second line brings it home. But a Mathnavi or a Masnavi is where each couplet ends in the same rhyme scheme. Or each line of the couplet ends the same way. So it's like 1 1, 2 2, 3 3, 4 4. But each couplet then has a different rhyme scheme. So that's how it's structured. And this is different from a ghazal or a rubai, a quatrain, or other types of poetry. The full title of the work is Masnavi Ma'navi, the spiritual couplets. Bilal, can I get some water, please? So let's look at the influence of Masnavi. It was an immensely influential and popular text for centuries in the Muslim world. It was studied and read and recited and commented upon by generations of scholars. In Mughal India, Masnavi was declared mandatory reading for government officials by the Emperor Akbar. And the idea was for them to understand the highest levels of deendari. Deendari means like living religion, actually living it out. So these are government officials. They have huge responsibilities. They have to raise armies, take taxes, manage populations. And Akbar says, read Masnavi alongside other texts to know what it means to be a good Muslim, a good ruler, a good governor. The library of Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II, who is the son of Mehmed II, conqueror of Istanbul, contained 14 complete copies of the Masnavi. This kind of metric is significant because think about how much effort and time it takes to write one page, right? Handwrite one page, let alone decorate the page. And you have 14 very elaborate copies of the Masnavi in the royal court. It tells us something about the attention, the devotion, the patronage, the importance of Masnavi to people at the highest levels of Ottoman society. And then we can infer the influence going down. Masnavi was also really influential for someone like Allama Iqbal. One of Iqbal's greatest poems is called Neynama, which is this brilliant work of fiction where Iqbal and Maulana Rumi, so Maulana Rumi is Iqbal's spiritual guide. They go on a journey through the planets of the solar system. It's like a mirage. The narrative structure imitates the mirage of the Prophet Muhammad. And Neynama is such a brilliant, such a passionate, thoughtful piece of work. Inshallah, Brother Shibli, we should have a session on Neynama sometime down the line. I'll read to you a short poem by Iqbal about Rumi to give you an idea of what Maulana meant to Iqbal. So Iqbal says, गलत निगर है तेरी चश्मे नीम बाज अब तक, तेरा वजूद तेरे वास्ते है राज अब तक, तेरा नाज नहीं आशनाए राज अब तक, के है क़याम से खाली तेरी नमाज अब तक, गुसिस्ता तार है तेरी खुदी का साज अब तक, कि तू है नगमाए रूमी से बेनियाज अब तक. Your half eyes open fail to see still. Your existence to yourself is a mystery still. Your passion is a stranger to passion still. For your prayer is empty of substance still. the strings of the instrument of your selfhood are broken, still, for you consider yourself unconcerned with the songs of Rumi. Still, ab tak. So Iqbal is saying, Khuda ke waste, read Rumi to know what it means to be the best type of Muslim. Masnavi is also a living heritage. In places in the Muslim world that are still connected to Islamic civilization, they read Masnavi, they study Masnavi, they take time out for Masnavi. These are pictures from when I was in Iran. I would attend these literary circles. There's me over there above the teacher. And they would just read Masnavi, and the teacher would explain line by line. And I attended, this was like session number 65 or something. I just popped in for a couple of sessions. And it was so wonderful to see people of all ages and both genders come, give up their time and study Masnavi. Because they could be doing what? They could be, what's the word? Watching Netflix and numbing their minds. They could be wasting their time watching reels of quite dubious value, right? But instead, they said, no, let's take time out and learn from Maulana. And this was such a bright spot in my time in Iran. I'm so glad that I was able to go to these sessions. If you ever learn language overseas, you must get out of the classroom and go into these kinds of places. Yes? They could be playing games. They could be playing games. That's right. There was this 10-year-old boy next to me, and I've never met someone who, at 10 years old, who was so thoughtful and mature. It's like God mixed up his soul with an old person or something, and God gave him an old soul. I don't know what he was doing there, but I was just so blown away by him. So it was a really wonderful thing, and so Masnavi it's a living heritage. Now, let's talk about Neynama, which is the first poem. It's 34 couplets, and the whole poem is told from the perspective of a reed flute. And the reed flute is a metaphor for the human soul. But at the same time, the ney, or the reed flute, it also represents the spiritual guide and the teacher. So we're going to do a line-by-line reading, focusing on three main themes of the Masnavi, which is longing and separation, love and self-purification. Yes?
Do we get the slides somehow, or we have to take notes?
I can email them to you if you like. Come up after. But what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the Masnavi first. I wanted actually someone here who would who would play the flute and I would recite Masnavi, but this is what we'll have to do instead. And you'll notice that some of the verses are easier to understand than others. Some of it is like sort of, it's narrative, and as the kids say these days, it's vibe. But others have really, really deep and very profound points. And I will try and then explain some of this in the short time we have left. The translation in the video is not perfect, but I've sort of come up with my own translation when we go through the slides.
بشنوسنی چون حکایت می کند از جدایی ها شکایت می کند کز نیستان تا مرا ببریدند از نفیرم مرد و زن نالیدند سینه خواهم شرح از فراق تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق هر کسی کو دور ماند از اصل خویش باز جوید روزگار وصل خویش من به هر جمعیتی نالان شدم جفت بدحالان و خوشحالان شدم هر کسی از ظن خود شد یار من از درون من نجست اسرار من سر من از ناله من دور نیست لیک چشم و گوش را آن نور نیست تن ز جان و جان ز تن مستور نیست لیک کس را دید جان دستور نیست آتش است این بانگ نای و نیست باد هر که این آتش ندارد نیست باد. آتش عشق است کاندر نی فتاد، جوشش عشق است کاندر می فتاد. نی حریف هر که از یاری برید، پرده هایش پرده های ما درید. همچو نی زهری و تریاقی که دید، همچو نی دمساز و مشتاقی که دید. نی حدیث راه پرخون می کند، قصه های عشق مجنون می کند. محرم این هوش جز بیهوش نیست، بر زبان را مشتری جز گوش نیست. در غم ما روزها بیگاه شد، روزها با سوزها همراه شد. روزها گر رفت گو رو باک نیست، تو بمان ای آنکه چون تو پاک نیست. هر که جز ماهی ز آبش سیر شد، هر که بی روزیست روزش دیر شد. در نیابد حال پخته هیچ خام، پس سخن کوتاه باید والسلام. بند بکسد باش آزاد ای پسر، چند باشی بند سیم و بند زر. گر بریزی بحر را در کوزه، چند گنجد قسمت یک روزه. کوزه چشم حریصان پر نشد، تا صدف قانع نشد پر در نشد. هر که را جام ز عشقی چاک شد، او ز حرص و عیب کلی پاک شد. شاد باش ای عشق خوش سودای ما، ای طبیب جمله علتهای ما. ای دوای نخوت و ناموس ما، ای تو افلاطون و جالینوس ما. جسم خاک از عشق برافلاک شد، کوه در رقص آمد و چالاک شد. عشق جان تور آمد عاشقا، تور مست و خر موسی صعقا. با لب دمساز خود گر جفتمی، همچو نی من گفتنی ها گفتمی. هر که از او هم زبانی شد جدا، بی زبان شد گرچه دارد صد نوا. چون که گل رفت و گلستان درگذشت، نشنوی زان پس ز بلبل سرگذشت. جمله معشوق است و عاشق مرده ای، زنده معشوق است و عاشق مرده ای. چون نباشد عشق را پروای او، او چو مرغ ماند بی پر وای او. من چگونه هوش دارم پیش و پس، چون نباشد نور یارم پیش و پس. عشق خواهد کاین سخن بیرون بود، آینه غماز نبود چون بود. آینه دانی چرا غماز نیست، زانکه زنگار از رخش ممتاز نیست.
How are we all feeling? What's the mood? How's the vibe? Did we get the vibe right? So that's Neynama presented far better than I ever could. I mentioned that there are three main themes, as far as my limited perception can see. What are the three themes? Who remembers? Sorry? Longing and separation. What's the second theme? Love. And what's the third theme? Self-purification. Good work. That'll be on the test. So, بشنو این نی چون شکایت می کند، از جدایی ها حکایت می کند. Listen to the reed flute, how it tells its tale, how it complains bitterly of separation. کز نیستان تمرا ببریده اند در نفیلم مرد و زن نالیده اند. Saying, ever since I was cut out from the reed bed, my wail causes men and women to weep. So the reed bed is where the ney, the reed flute, is cut out from. And it's taken and shaped and crafted and then thrown out into the world to be used and hopefully not abused, right? That's a metaphor for us, really, right? We come from somewhere, we're taken from somewhere, put into this world, and then life ensues. سینه خواهم شرح از فراق تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق. I seek a chest torn by separation, the reed flute, that I may share my tale of longing. You have to be open to understand. You have to want to understand and listen. هر کسی که دور ماند از اصل خیش باز جوید روزگار وصل خیش. Whoever strays far from their essence longs to return to that state of union. And so here, right at the opening of Neynama, we have the first theme, which is separation and longing, firaq and ishtiaq. And look at this beautiful nastalik, our diagonal script. The way the word is written is almost as beautiful as the concept. Firaq and ishtiaq, separation and longing, are one of these central concepts in Islamic spirituality. It's this idea that we're here in this world, but we're not really of this world. We're sort of in this state of unease and discomfort, right? It's because we come from somewhere else, and of course, we're going somewhere else. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى شَهِدْنَا. In Islamic theology, we hold that in the life before this life, right? We talk a lot about the next life, but there's also a life before this one. We were taken and presented before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and made to bear witness to His majesty and beauty. We said, Bala, Shahidna, we see. This primordial pact, they call this Mithaq Alast, Yawm Alast, is the primary event in the life before this life. And we live this life in the echoes of that moment, longing to remember and re-witness and reunite. Because we're taken, and when we're put into this world, a veil is put over us. And we forget that life. We're made to forget. Life then is a journey of re-remembering what we always knew. So this sense of being out of place is central. It's probably why all of you are interested in Islamic mysticism and spirituality and why you've come here. Because we all feel it if we allow ourselves to feel it. We all have this spiritual compass inside us, this fitra, right? That is always hinting, nudging, pushing. Our soul wants to go back. And when we don't listen to this fitra, to this compass, we are disassociated, we're alienated, we're not all there, right? Someone said that human culture, all of it, its entirety, is this search for meaning. Human poetry and art, music, dance, ritual, religion, all of this is this search for meaning, collective or individual. If you look at any piece of human culture, high human culture, you will find this quest for a search for meaning. So it's always there. And that's what Maulana is saying. That's what, this is the central idea in Islamic spirituality. من به هر جمعیتی نالان شدم جفت بدحالان و خوشحالان شدم. I have grieved in every gathering. I accompany the unhappy and the happy. I'm always there. This sense of firaq, ishtiyaq is always there. No matter how rich or poor, lucky or unlucky, well off or not well off someone is, fortunate or unfortunate. There's always this sense that there's something more. And when we connect to that something more, we're in the right place. And when we disconnect, you can see the consequences, for example, in the society we live in. هر کسی از زن خود شد یار من، از درون من نجست اسرار من. All think they have befriended me, but none have sought out my secrets from within me. So people think they've got it figured out, right? What life is all about, this philosopher or that mystic or this person. We all have our vision of what we think we're doing. But actually, are we really ready to open up and go on this internal journey? سر من از نالای من دور نیست، لیک چشم و گوش را آن نور نیست. My secret is not hidden far from my cry, yet it is not something for the eyes and ears. So the idea is there's something more than just our sense perception, right? What we see and hear and can perceive. There's something beyond. There's this veil. And Maulana is hinting or saying or asking us to go beyond. تن ز جان و جان ز تن مستور نیست، لیک کس را دید جان دستور نیست. Body is not veiled from soul, and neither is soul from body. The soul is here, but no one is allowed to or permitted to see the soul. So we need to go beyond just, again, physical sense perception and the confines of our ego. آتش است این بانگ نی و نیست باد، هر که این آتش ندارد نیست باد. The sound of this reed is fire, it's not air. Whoever does not have this fire is nothing except air, hot air. آتش عشق است که اندر نیفتد، جوشش عشق است که اندر می افتد. Love's fire is what makes every reed flute pine. Love's fervor thus lends potency to wine. Vacuum, if it's the negative emotion, then ishtiaq is, ishq is the positive emotion. Ishq is what pulls us, right? Ishq is passionate, selfless, burning love meant for Allah. From our perspective, because ishq goes both ways, it is the desire to behold and unite with the creator of the universe. What could be more blissful than that? It's the central concept in Islamic mysticism. Beyond punishment and reward, ishq is considered the highest motivation. I worship God because I don't want to go to hell. Okay. I worship God because I want to go to heaven. Also okay. I worship God because I want to see God. I want to unite with God. That's the highest level. From the perspective of God, because ishq, love is reciprocal. Ishq is considered the highest force in creation, the reason for creation itself. Sheikh Nu Keller, who is a contemporary Islamic scholar, asked one of his teachers, and Sheikh Nu Keller is a convert to Islam and he has a background in philosophy. He asked his teachers, what's the reason for the creation of the universe and for human life and everything? And the teachers simply said that there might be love. God's attributes, infinite and mighty and majestic and potent, power and destruction, but most of all, love, they need to be manifested. There needs to be an object for these qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to, I suppose, be in action. I love you, but if I don't show you this love, if you don't have an opportunity to reciprocate this love, where is the love, right? Yes.
What about Rahman, compassion and mercy?
That all comes into love.
Okay.
That's all. God has 99 attributes that He gives to us, right? Or that He tells us. But He starts almost every chapter of the Quran with two: the most beneficent and the most merciful. Ar-Rahman wa Ar-Rahim. These mercy and beneficence, these are faces of love, right?
I guess what I'm asking is, you said the object is necessary in order for the love to be manifest. But we could say the same thing for mercy and compassion, justice,
Yes, of course.
forgiveness,
Of course.
pretty much anything. So
Of
what
course.
distinguishes love from all of the others?
I would say ishq it encompasses all of the others. It's like the top of the pyramid, I suppose. For Iqbal, ishq is a creative, purifying force, right? I think someone who's motivated by ishq, he's not someone who will be who will be deluded or disappointed or led astray by dunya, right? You know who has ishq? Ahle Gaza have ishq, right? That's why they have endured so long. You know who doesn't have ishq? Muhammad bin Salman, Muhammad bin Zayed, and Sisi. May God guide them, and if not, may He destroy them. If they had ishq, if they had khudi, we would see a very, very different world. Iqbal writes on ishq, he says, ishq dame Jibrail, ishq dil Mustafa, ishq Khuda ka Rasool, ishq Khuda ka Kalam. Ishq is the breath of Jibrail, ishq is the heart of Mustafa. Ishq is the prophet of God, ishq is the word of God. Ishq mizrab se naghmaye tare hayat, ishq se noore hayat, ishq se nare hayat. Ishq is the plectrum of the song of the string of life. So ishq is what activates all of these other values. Ishq is the light of life. Ishq is the fire of life. But ishq, we can't really talk about ishq. You have to feel ishq, right? You can have oceans of words about ishq, but it's not until you जब तक आप मैदान में नहीं उतरते हैं, then you won't really know what ishq is, right? The poet says, अब लफ्ज़ व बयान सब ख़त्म हुए, अब लफ्ज़ व बयान का काम ही नहीं, अब इश्क का है पयाम अपना, और इश्क का payam hai hi nahi, right? So this is something experiential ultimately. And maybe all of human language is just a million different ways of trying to describe something that's undescribable. So that's ishq, this extremely powerful, purifying, creative, liberating force. If you have ishq, you won't fear this dunya, right? If you have ishq, you have purpose. Ishq gives you vision and direction and meaning. Back to Maulana. Ne harife har ke az yari burid, pardaha pardahai ma darid. The reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its notes lift the veil upon your heart. Hamchu ne zahri o teriyaki ke did, hamchu ne damsaz o mushtaki ke did. Who has seen a poison and a cure like the reed? Who has seen such a passionate companion like the reed? Ne hadise rahe purkhun mikonad, qissa haye ishq majnun mikonad. The ishq tells of the path filled with blood. It tells the stories of the love of Majnun. محرم این هوش جز به هوش نیست مر زبان را مشتری جز گوش نیست. Only the senseless, only those who go beyond the senses will start to understand ishq. For the tongue has no customer but the ear. You have to listen, you have to be open, right? Bishnu is the first word of Masnavi. Ikra is the first word of the Quran. It's not a coincidence that Masnavi starts with Bishnu and Quran starts with Ikra. It's this idea that we have to be receptive. در غم ما روزها بیگاه شد روزها به سوزها همراه شد. In our grief the days have lost meaning. Time itself has become one with this burning ache. روزها گر رفت گورو باک نیست تو بمان ای آن که چون تو پاک نیست. If the days pass, it matters not. But you, God, don't leave, for all else is impure. هر که جز ماهی از آبش سیر شد هر که بی روزیست روزش دیر شد. Water satiates all except fish. Whoever is without daily bread finds the day unbearable. So here it's this idea that the ashik is like the fish, right? Which is kind of funny to say. But here Maulana has made this analogy. Water satiates everyone else. But the ashik, the ones who want to go beyond, the ones who want to go extra, who feel that ishtiyaq, the things of this world just don't do it for them, right? That's what Maulana is trying to say here. And when you don't have your sustenance, every day is torture, every day is struggle. در نیاباد حال پخته هیچ خام پس سخن کوتاه باید والسلام. The raw does not understand the state of the ripe, so I must be brief and then farewell. Not everyone is built for this kind of journey, right? Not everyone gets it. There are people who they love cars and they love money. They live hopefully a good, decent, honest life, and that's enough, right? There's this famous story of the Bedouin who comes to the Prophet and he says, what's the minimum I need to do to get into heaven? The Prophet says, pray, fast, hajj, so on and so forth. And he goes, I'm doing nothing more than this. And he leaves. And the Sahaba are sort of shocked. And the Prophet says, yeah, that's enough. That's him. That's what he's built for. But this journey of ishq is something that requires, I think it requires a temperament. So you have to kind of already be a certain way. You have to sort of have certain questions in your mind. And then this, let's call it, this side of Islam offers you the couplet or the goblet, right? Islam is this amazing philosophy, this life force that appeals to every kind of person. So not everyone gets this talk of ishq and love and poetry. Some people are like, what's this poetry? Just life is easy, don't stress. But that doesn't work for everyone, right? بند بگسل باش آزاد ای پسر چند باشی بند سیم و بند زر. Break your chains and be free, O child. How long will you be a slave of silver and gold? گر بریزی بحر را در کوزه‌ای چند گنجد قسمت یک روزه‌ای. If you pour the ocean into a pot, will it hold more than a day's lot? There's only so much you can gain from the pleasure of this world before you're filled and satiated, right? But کوزه چشم حریصان پر نشد تا صدف خانه نشد پر دور نشد. The pot of the eye of the covetous is never filled. Until the oyster is content, no pearl will emerge. So we chase after dunya, but it's never fulfilling, right? هر که را جامه از عشقی چاک شد او از حرص و عیب کلی پاک شد. Only those who tear their clothes out of the passion of love are cleansed of all greed and defects. شاد باش عشق خوش سودای ما ای طبیب جمله علتهای ما. Rejoice, O love, our partner in trade, O healer of all our defects. ای دوای نخوت و ناموس ما ای تو افلاطون و جالینوس ما. O remedy of our pride and vanity, O you, our Plato and our Galen. Plato, right? Doctor of the mind. Galen, doctor of the body. Ishq is both. جسم خاک از عشق بر افلاک شد کوه در رقص آمد و چالاک شد. Through love does this earthly body soar the skies. The mountain trembles and flies. If the mountain moves and shakes and crumbles, what about the human heart, dead, like stone? Ishq is what brings it to life. The poet Hafiz al-Shirazi says, هرگز نمیرد آن که دلش زنده شد به عشق ثبت است بر جریده‌ی عالم دوام ما. The one whose heart that is enlivened with ishq will never die. Our immortality is recorded for all the world to see. Ishq جان تور آمد عاشقا تور مست و خر موسی صائقا. Love inspired the Mount of Sinai, O lover. It was entranced, it was drunk, and Moses fell down senseless. These two couplets are so stunning. This is a reference to the story of Hazrat Musa in the Quran. I think this is Surah Al-Araf, if I'm not mistaken. Hazrat Musa, driven by ishq, right, wants to behold God, and he goes to the mountain, Tur Sin, and he says, Arani unzur ilayk. Show yourself to me, I want to see you. And God says, what does God say? Lan tarani. You won't see me. But if I unveil myself to this mountain and the mountain can withstand my majesty, my tajalli, then you can see me. And God shows his tajalli and the mountain crumbles and Musa falls down senseless. So this is a quote from the Quran, and by the way, Maulana really beautifully fit the Arabic and the Persian and made it rhyme. When we read this verse normally, we read it from the lens of God's majesty and power, right? God shows himself and the mountain crumbles. But Maulana has an inward interpretation, let's call it. If Musa is motivated by ishq, then the mountain too also has ishq. All of creation worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not just that the mountain crumbles from God's majesty, but it's God's beauty, right? بالا به دمساز خود گر جفتمی همچونی من گفتنی ها گفتمی. With my own confidant, if I'd been paired, just like the reed, such stories I'd have shared. Now here Maulana changes the voice. We call this iltifat in the study of language. The Quran does this all the time. It changes the voice, right? So now it's Maulana speaking. هر که او از هم زبانی شد جدا بی زبان شد گرچه دارد صد نوا. All those separated from those of the same tongue are rendered mute, though they have 100 songs. چون که گل رفت و گلستان درگذشت نشنوی ز آن پس از بلبل سرگذشت. When the flower wilts and the garden fades, you will no longer hear the nightingale's tales. جمله معشوق است و عاشق پرده‌ای، زنده معشوق است و عاشق مرده‌ای. The beloved is all. The beloved is everything. The lover is but a veil. It's the beloved that's alive and the lover who is dead. This is saying many things. You could have hours on just this couplet. But one thing this couplet is saying is that to truly love, to have ishq, you need to go beyond your ego. Hafiz Shirazi says, میان عاشق و معشوق هیچ حائل نیست، تو خود حجاب خودی حافظ از میان برخیز. Between the lover and the beloved, there's no barrier. You yourself are the barrier, Hafiz. Get up. Ishq, true love, right? Not egoistic love that wants and takes. True love gives everything, right? That's what Maulana is saying here. چون نباشد عشق را پروای او چون مرغی ماند بی پر وای او. The one whom love has shunned is like a bird without wings, oh woe. Love, remember, is reciprocal. We take one step towards God and God runs to us. We turn away from God and God turns away from us. One of my favorite verses of the Quran in Surah Hashr, لا تكونوا الذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Do not be like those who forgot God, so God made them forget themselves. من چگونه هوش دارم پیش و پس چون نباشد نور یارم پیش و پس. How can I have any calm or sense neither here nor there when the light of my beloved is neither here nor there? عشق خواهد که این سخن بیرون بود آینه غماز نبود چون بود. Love wills it that this word come forth, this Neynama, this Masnavi. If a mirror does not reflect, what use is it? آینه دانی چرا غماز نیست ز آنکه زنگار از رخش ممتاز نیست. Do you know why your heart's mirror does not shine? Because it's covered with rust. Scrape it clear. Maulana ends the Neynama here, and he opens the Masnavi here with this message of self-purification. To move, right, from the negation of firaq, from alienation, to the fulfillment of ishq and union, ishq and wisal. We need to purify ourselves and perfect our character, to be worthy, right? So this journey of self-rectification, tazkiyah, tasfiyah, takhliyah, is the primary business of mysticism and religion as a whole. If religion is not making you do this, you have, as the Amir Khan film goes, you have the wrong number. Rumi uses this metaphor of a polished mirror. It's a very old metaphor. This idea that ultimate human perfection is a matter of removing deficiencies, of becoming who you were meant to be. It's not that when we do tazkiyah, we gain virtue. We're becoming who we were always meant to be, beyond all the dust and the rust, right? So we go back to where we started, actually. The elevated soul, this is another part of this metaphor. The elevated soul Nafs al-mutma'inna, is like a polished mirror upon which true light, true forms are reflected. So the elevated soul reflects the light of God. Because of this soul, everything else shines, is brightened. You meet a saint, right? A waliullah, and everything like revolves around them, right? Time and space and destiny bend to the waliullah, right? Because they have elevated themselves and the light of God shines through. But what about someone whose mirror is rusty, is not polished, whose mirror is broken, someone who's broken their own mirror? They suck all the light like a black hole. What terrible people to be around, right? Self-purification, what does it actually mean in practical terms, right? So Maulana and other Sufis, you'll find discussion of spiritual states and special knowledge and kashf and ilham and manazil and stations, all of this, right? That's way above my pay grade. For me, self-purification most immediately means working on ourselves, disciplining our ego, holding ourselves to account. This is the difficult, messy, scary work of facing ourselves. Why am I acting the way I'm acting? What's motivating me? How am I to the people around me? How am I to myself? And this is something far more profound than the secular practice of Western psychology, because this is taking us somewhere. As the famous mystical saying goes, Man arafa rabbahu arafa nafsahu. He who knows himself knows his Lord. And this process of self-purification is the most important thing we will ever do for ourselves. There's nothing more important, and there's nothing harder than this. This is how Maulana ends Neynama and opens Masnavi. Clean this mirror. Now, I mentioned earlier in the lecture, and we're coming to the end of the talk now, that Maulana, he knew everything, but it's not until he met Shams Tabriz that the knowledge left here and came here. The ilm al-yaqeen became ayn al-yaqeen, right? The knowledge became mu'arifa, gnosis. Because there are levels of knowledge, right? There's information. This is red and this is blue. Then there's ilm, there's knowledge, which is when we tie information together. Then there's wisdom, hikmah, when we start asking, what does this mean? Is this important? Where is this taking me? Where is this taking us? And then there's highest level of knowledge, mu'arifa, like divine knowledge, which is when we see things, ayn al-yaqeen, for what they really are. This journey of ilm al-yaqeen to ayn al-yaqeen, from knowledge to mu'arifa, is something Rumi went through. And I know we're all tired, but let's get through this last slide. This is the last point. Hopefully we can take something important from this. Rumi writes in the introduction of book 5 to Masnavi, how to sort of be like a balanced Muslim, right? How to become not just balanced, but the best kind of Muslim. He says, Shariat hamchu shama ast و چون در راه آمدی آن رفتن تو طریقت است و چون رسیدی به مقصود آن حقیقت است. شریعت علم است، طریقت عمل است، حقیقت الوصول إلى الله. Shariat is like a lamp, right? The outward forms of Islam, prayer and worship and fasting and charity, all these things. This is like a lamp. You're traveling on the path is tariqat. So you have the lamp and you're walking, you're progressing. And meeting God is the destination. Or to put it another way, Maulana puts it another way, Sharia is knowledge, Tariqat is action, and Haqiqat is meeting God. Or to put it another way, theory, practice, self-purification. Knowledge, worship, spiritual openings. If I have the lamp and I'm on the path, but I don't have the destination in mind, I'm going in circles. If I have the destination in mind, but I don't have the lamp, I'm going in circles. I'll be lost. So, worship without self-purification is empty ritual. We know this. How many people do we know around us who know, they have knowledge of Sharia and they do the practice, hopefully, but it doesn't seem to get them anywhere, right? I know someone who's done Umrah 17 times. And you talk to his children and they say, he's such a pain. He doesn't know how to talk and interact. He's a constant source of tension and strife. In Pakistan, where I come from, in Ramadan, people go crazy in Ramadan. They go overboard. The people who never pray, they will spend the whole night in Taraweeh prayer. But then when Ramadan ends, they go back to exactly how they were. So there's something missing in this journey, right? And that's this difficult work of facing the self. Khud ko samna karna. Az khud muwajihat kardan. Muwajahatu anfusina. Facing yourself. Muhasaba, muraqaba. Opening this up and taking this ego and putting it in its place. Because if we don't do that, where does Maulana get this idea from? He tells us, because in the very next line, which I conveniently covered until I pressed this button, he has a quote from the Quran. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ أَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يَشْرِكُ بِإِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. So let those who desire to meet their Lord, not those who desire to go to heaven, or those who desire to not go to hell, those who desire to meet their Lord, let them do good works and associate none in worship of their Lord. So Maulana takes a sort of a deeper interpretation of this verse. وَلَا يَشْرَكُوا بِإِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Associate none in worship of their Lord. This isn't just about the idea of literally worshipping another god. Do you really think Quraysh, Abu Lahab, Abu Sufyan, the reason they opposed the Prophet was because they believed in these other gods? They were in pursuit of gods of their own making, right? What are some gods of our own making that we erect? This is a question. Power. What else? Money. Ego. Status. Fame. Beauty. The tribe. The nation. Utopia. But most dangerous of all, the self. So when we erect ourselves in place of God, this is shirk. This is what this verse is saying, Maulana tells us. So we need all parts of this journey, right? Otherwise, we won't get to the destination. This is the end of this part of the talk. Thank you all for being here with me. Please join me in dua. This is really important. Join me in dua. Oh Allah, allow the knowledge that we've gained here today to become warifa, to leave just our minds, just the intellectual space, and enter our hearts. And may Allah have mercy on Maulana Rumi and enlighten his grave. and let us meet Maulana Rumi on the Day of Judgment alongside the noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, you should all read Masnavi, you should all read Rumi, right? But let's talk about, last point, translations. Unfortunately, almost all of Rumi's quotes in English are fake. Rumi has been immensely popular in the West, right, in recent times. But this has been presented through a de-Islamicized or unorthodox lens. Who knows, who has this book? Coleman Barks, right? I think a lot of you have heard of Coleman Barks or have seen this book. The primary culprit of this distortion of Rumi is Coleman Barks. Barks doesn't even know Farsi. He takes existing English translations of Rumi and de-Islamicizes them and gives them his own spin. It's nice English. It can be thoughtful, it can be thought-provoking. It may have guided some people to a deeper exploration of themselves, but it's not Rumi, and there's no Islam in it. So, no Coleman Barks, right? The greatest tragedy is Muslims learning about our own history and heritage and religion through the West. This is a self-orientalism. This is a self-colonialism. What a tragedy. One of an intellectual in Pakistan said, how shameful is it that our children in Pakistan learn about Rumi through Alif Shifaq. What a disaster. So, if you're interested in good translations of Rumi, you can consider Nicholson. So he lived 100 years ago, very nice old English. Or Javed Mujaddadi, who has been putting out comprehensive translation of Masnavi for the past 15 years. He's just finished the last book. Or Muhammad Ali Mujarradi, who is actually a personal friend of mine. We studied Arabic together in Jordan. He just published a book, The Flame of Love, Rumi's 100 Most Passionate Poems. And he's on Instagram, has quite a big Instagram account, Persian Poetics. If you read Urdu, there are of course many commentaries on Rumi, and maybe Iqbal's poetry itself is the biggest commentary, right, on Rumi in Urdu. But the work of Maulana Ashraf Thanvi is often mentioned. Khalid Masnavi could be of interest to you. So, thank you all for coming. This is some information about this mission I have, I suppose. I run a teaching service, a thing, I suppose, called Ihya. And the whole idea is reviving our connection to culture and heritage and language in Muslim civilization. We can read Rumi in translation, but as I've tried to show you, it's so much better in the original language, right? So I offer personalized language tutoring in Urdu, in Persian, and in Arabic. Whatever you want or whatever your level is, the idea is I work with you and we get somewhere. So if you are interested, you know, those are my details. Otherwise, I have my freshly printed business cards here if anyone wants them after the session. If you know anyone who might be interested in something like this, please do let them know. Please do tell them. Yes? I can't teach Masnavi through here. That is something that can be done. Luckily, I have all the material presented. Yeah, the whole idea is to reconnect people to Muslim civilization. Because I think if we reconnect to our adab, we get deeper, more thoughtful, more sensitive Muslims, right? Because there's a break between the kind of Muslims we find today, of course, often driven by this kind of Salafism, and the kind of Islam we had in the past. So we've lost something that we can regain a part of when we reconnect to our Muslim heritage. Yes?
I have one question. At the very start, you mentioned about you met a boy 10 years old, and you said he had the soul of an old person.
Yeah.
So similar to that, do all of us have different levels of ish induced in our souls, of the stored with, or do we all born with the same level of ish, and then we try to find it level we achieve in our life? And if it's different, we're born with different levels, then why is it different?
There's a very strong idea in classical Islamic psychology and spirituality that everyone is built different. Everyone has a different temperament. And it starts at the physical and it goes all the way up to the spiritual. So the bodies are built differently and the souls are built differently. Why? I don't know. I don't know if everyone has different levels of ishq, but certainly everyone has different capacities. And you take one step towards God, God will run towards you. That's all I can say. Any other questions or thoughts?
Two questions. One was, you did tell us before, what is hudi? I forgot.
Right. And the second question?
The second one, you mentioned ilmul yaqeen and ainul yaqeen.
Uh-huh.
What about haqqul yaqeen? Is that when you meet Allah? Or how does that fit into the analogy?
So the first question, hudi is how Iqbal takes ishq and he puts it into this philosophy of action. So Iqbal says hudi is the Muslim who is tall and proud and brave and courageous and kind and generous. Hudi is the Muslim who has a sense of self, but not in a negative, not in an egoistic way, but like a spine, a backbone. That's hudi. And it was and it still is, a really meaningful concept to try and take Muslims out of this defeat mentality, right? This passive mentality. So that's the device Iqbal uses, hudi. And the second question, haqqul yaqeen, yeah, that's sort of like the last level, yeah. But it's like advanced stuff, it's above my pay grade. So may we all get there one day. Yeah. Yes?
So you can go to the Masnavi Iranian groups.
Uh-huh.
Anything you can recommend online or?
Masnavi Iranian groups?
No. You can't share anything online.
Right.
Follow or?
Yeah, like there would be lectures on Masnavi on YouTube by good solid scholars. So it's the scholars who are interested in like traditional Islam, right? That would do the work on Masnavi. So people like, in English, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, British convert to Islam. Maybe he's the Ghazali of our time. He knows Farsi. He's read Masnavi, right? So I would point you to him first and foremost. As for Urdu speakers, people like Ustad Ahmed Javed, for example, has wonderful, very deep lectures, and I would recommend them. Yeah. Anything else? Chalo, thank you all so much. We are going to, just after Brother Shibli closes off, we're going to hand out some sweets as a reward for sticking through this session. So could I ask Zinia to, and I don't know where Bilal has gone, but could I ask Zinia to manage that, please? Thank you so much.